All in all, Jaffa enjoyed the largest defense force available to the Palestinians in any given locality. A total of 1,500 volunteers confronted the 5,000 Jewish troops. They survived a 3-week siege and attack that began in the middle of April and ended in the middle of May. When Jaffa fell, its entire population of 50,000 was expelled with the help of British mediation, meaning that their flight was less chaotic than in Haifa. Still, there were scenes reminiscent of the horrors that took place in the northern harbor of Haifa. People were literally pushed into the sea when the crowds tried to board the far too small fishing boats that would take them to Gaza, while Jewish troops shot over their heads to hasten their expulsion. With the fall of Jaffa, the occupying Jewish forces had emptied and depopulated all the major cities and towns of Palestine. The vast majority of their inhabitants, of all classes, denominations, and occupations, never saw their cities again, while the more politicized among them would come to play a formative role in the re emergence of the Palestinian national movement in the form of the PLO, demanding first and foremost their right to return. Already towards the end of March, the Jewish operations had destroyed much of the rural hinterland of Jaffa and Tel Aviv. There was an apparent division of labor between the Haganah forces and the Irgun. While the Haganah moved in an orderly fashion from one place to the next according to plan, the Irgun was allowed sporadic actions in villages beyond the scope of the original list. This is how the Irgun arrived in the village of Saich Muyanis, or Munis as it is known today, on 30 March and expelled its inhabitants by force. Today you will find the elegant campus of Tel Aviv University sprawling over the ruins of this village, while one of the village's few remaining houses has become the university's faculty club. Had there not been the tacit understanding between the Haganah and the Irgun, Saich Muyanis might have been saved. The heads of the village had made a serious effort to cultivate a cordial relationship with the Haganah in order to prevent their expulsion, but the Arabists who had concluded the treaty were nowhere to be found on the day the Irgun showed up and expelled the entire village. In April, the operations in the countryside were more closely connected to the urbicide. Villages near urban centers were taken and expelled, and sometimes subjected to massacres, in a campaign of terror designed to prepare the ground for a more successful takeover of the cities. The consultancy met again on a Wednesday, 7th April 1948. It was decided to destroy and expel the inhabitants from all the villages on the Tel Aviv Haifa Road, Jenin Haifa Road, and the Jerusalem Jaffa Road. At the end of the day, apart from a tiny handful of villages, no one was spared. Thus, on the day the Irgun wiped out Saich Muyanis, the Haganah occupied 6 villages in the same area within a week. Hirbat Azun was the first on 2nd April, followed by Hirbat Lid, Arab al Fukara, Arab al Nufayyat, and Damira, all cleansed by 10th of April, and Cherkis on the 15th. By the end of the month, another 3 villages in the vicinity of Jaffa and Tel Aviv, Hirbat al Mansiya, Biyar Adas, and the large village of Miska, had all been taken and destroyed. All of this took place before a single regular Arab soldier had entered Palestine, and the pace now becomes hard to follow for contemporary as well as for later historians. Between 30 March and 15 May, 200 villages were occupied and their inhabitants expelled. This is a fact that must be repeated, as it undermines the Israeli myth that the Arabs ran away once the Arab invasion began. Almost half of the Arab villages had already been attacked by the time the Arab governments eventually, and as we know, reluctantly decided to send in their troops. Another 90 villages would be wiped out between 15 May and 11 June 1948, when the first of two truces finally came into effect. Eyewitnesses on the Jewish side recall clearly thinking throughout April that the army could strive for more. In his recent interview with official historians, Palti Sela, whose testimony can be found in the Haganah archives in Tel Aviv, used a colorful language to reconstruct that atmosphere of extra zeal. Palti Sela was a member of the Jewish forces that occupied and cleansed the towns of Baizan, and who were ordered to push out the large Bedouin tribes that had for centuries seasonally resided in the area. He later remarked, "After we cleansed the area from the Bedouin tribes, the pus," he used the Yiddish word for a purulent wound, farunkel, of the Beizan are still infected with two villages, Faruna and Samaria. They did not seem to be afraid and were still cultivating their fields and continued using the roads. One of the many villages captured during these attacks in the east was that of Sirin. Its story epitomizes the fate that befell scores of villages depopulated by Jewish forces in Marj ibn Amir and the Beizan Valley, where today one searches in vain for any trace of the Palestinian life that once flourished there.